Have you ever found yourself standing in the ruins of a life you carefully built, wondering how it all fell apart so quickly? You look around at the shattered pieces of your plans, the smoke still clearing from the collapse of your expectations, and you realize that nothing is as it was supposed to be. Maybe you are staring at a completely blank slate right now, and instead of feeling the excitement and freedom that people say comes with a fresh start, you just feel terrified. The blank page doesn't look like an invitation. It looks like a void. When you have lost everything, your relationship, your security, your carefully curated reputation, or even your core sense of identity, where do you even begin to start over? How do you one foot in front of the other when you can't even see the ground? Is God still writing your story when the pages look entirely empty? Let's talk about that. I remember when my entire world turned upside down a few years ago. I had my whole life mapped out. I was a person who loved blueprints, timelines, and 5-year plans. I knew exactly where I was going, what I was doing, and who I was doing it with. My identity was firmly anchored in those plans. And then, in the span of just a few short months, the bottom completely dropped out. It wasn't a slow leak. It was a sudden, catastrophic failure of everything I had built my life upon. I lost the career I had poured my soul into, the job that I thought defined my worth and my purpose. And shortly after that devastating blow, a relationship I thought would last forever just ended. The 2 pillars holding up the roof of my life were kicked out from under me. I remember sitting on the floor of my living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes because I had to move out of the place I loved, just staring blankly at the wall. The packing tape was sitting next to me, but I couldn't bring myself to pack another thing. The silence in that room was completely deafening. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that forces you to listen to your own breaking heart. I felt so foolish for having hoped, so incredibly naive for thinking I had everything figured out. I remember looking up at the ceiling and asking, God, why did you let me build all of this just to watch it burn down? Why did you give me the desires of my heart only to turn them to ash? I wasn't just grieving the loss of my present reality. I was grieving the loss of the future I thought I was promised. I was mourning the vacations we would never take, the promotions I would never get, the life I had already lived in my mind. I felt utterly stripped bare, like a tree in the dead of winter with absolutely no leaves left to hide behind. Every morning I woke up, the crushing weight of reality would sit heavily on my chest before my eyes even opened. For a few blissful seconds of sleep, I would forget what had happened, but then consciousness would return, and the tidal wave of loss would wash over me all over again. I was surviving, but I certainly wasn't living. When you find yourself in a season like that, a season of profound stripping away, it is incredibly easy to believe the lie that God has abandoned you. It feels like He has walked off the set of your life and left you to clean up the mess. But as I sat in the ashes of my own life, desperately searching for a lifeline, I began to realize that the Bible is absolutely filled with people who had to start over from nothing. In fact, it seems to be God's preferred method of doing His greatest work. Think about Naomi in the Book of Ruth. She left her home in Bethlehem with a husband, 2 sons, and a future. But a famine forced them to pivot, and in the foreign land of Moab, tragedy struck not once, not twice, but 3 times. She lost her husband, and then she lost both of her sons. In the ancient world, a widow with no sons was the most vulnerable, destitute person in society. She had lost her family, her provision, her security, and her identity. She was entirely empty. When Naomi finally dragged herself back to Bethlehem years later, the townspeople barely recognized her. They asked, "Can this be Naomi?" And her response is one of the most raw, heartbroken statements in all of Scripture. She said, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like you went into a season of your life full of hope, full of dreams, full of love, and you came out the other side completely empty? Naomi wasn't sugarcoating her pain. She wasn't putting on a fake religious smile and pretending everything was fine. She was devastated. She blamed God. She felt deeply, profoundly empty. But here is the beautiful, breathtaking reality of Naomi's story. Her emptiness was not the end of the book. It was simply the end of a chapter. While Naomi was weeping in her bitterness, unable to see anything but her loss, God was already orchestrating a magnificent story of redemption behind the scenes. He was positioning Ruth, he was preparing Boaz, and he was setting the stage to weave Naomi's broken family line into the very lineage of King David and ultimately, Jesus Christ. Naomi thought her story was over because her pages looked blank. She didn't realize that God was simply clearing the page so he could write a masterpiece. What if the ruins you are standing in right now are not a graveyard, but a construction site? C.S. Lewis once wrote a profound analogy about how God works in our lives. He said to imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, you understand what he is doing. He is fixing the drains, stopping the leaks in the roof, and doing the basic repairs you knew were necessary. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. When my career and my relationship were stripped away, I felt like my house was being demolished. I thought God was destroying me. But looking back now, with the gift of hindsight, I can see that the foundation I had built my life upon was incredibly fragile. I had built my foundation on the approval of my boss, the security of a paycheck, and the affection of another human being. Those are wonderful things, but they make terrible gods. They cannot bear the weight of a human soul. God didn't let my house burn down because he hated me. He let it fall because he loved me too much to let me live in a fragile house that would ultimately collapse on top of me. He wanted to rebuild my life on the solid rock of his unconditional love and his unshakable purpose. Consider the analogy of the winter tree again. When a tree loses all its leaves in the bitter cold of winter, it looks dead. To the untrained eye, it is just a barren, lifeless piece of wood sticking out of the frozen ground. But arborists will tell you that winter is actually one of the most crucial seasons for a tree's survival. In the winter, the tree isn't dying. It is conserving. It stops pouring its energy into the outward, visible production of leaves and fruit, and instead, it drives all of its sap and life force deep down into its root system. It is strengthening its anchor. It is preparing for the spring. If you feel stripped bare right now, please hear this. You are not dead. You are in winter. God is using this painful hidden season to drive your roots deeper into him. When the external things that validate us are removed, we are forced to discover who we really are and whose we really are. You are learning to draw your strength from an unseen source. And when the spring finally comes, and it will come, the growth that emerges from your life will be stronger, healthier, and more vibrant than anything you could have produced before the winter. Or think about the phenomenon of the lodgepole pine forest. In the natural world, forest fires are devastating. They scorch the earth, reduce towering trees to blackened matchsticks, and turn lush green landscapes into gray wastelands. But the lodgepole pine possesses a fascinating biological trait called serotiny. Its pine cones are sealed shut with a thick, hard resin. For those cones to open and release their seeds, they require immense, intense heat. They literally require a fire. Without the devastation of the forest fire, the seeds of new life would remain permanently locked inside, and the forest would eventually die off. The destruction of the old forest is the exact biological prerequisite for the birth of the new one. Sometimes, the very fires that burn our plans to the ground are the exact catalysts required to unlock seeds of purpose, resilience, and faith inside of us that never would have opened in the comfort of the shade. So where do you begin when you have to start over? How do you rebuild when you are staring at a blank slate? You begin with surrender. You stop clutching the ashes of your old life, and you open your empty hands to God. You don't have to have a 5-year plan anymore. You just need to have enough faith for today. Starting over doesn't happen in a triumphant cinematic montage. It happens in the quiet, unglamorous daily choices to keep going. It happens when you choose to get out of bed, even when the weight of the void is heavy. It happens when you pray a one-word prayer of help from the floor of your living room. It happens when you decide to trust that the author of your faith hasn't dropped his pen. If you are standing in the ruins today, I want to gently encourage you to take a deep breath. It is okay to grieve what was lost. It is okay to cry over the boxes you are packing. God is not intimidated by your tears, your anger, or your questions of why. He sits with you on the floor in the deafening silence. But do not believe the lie that your story is over. The blank slate is terrifying, yes, but it is also deeply sacred. It is the canvas upon which God does his best work. You are not defined by the career you lost, the person who walked away, or the mistakes you made. You are defined by the God who breathed life into your lungs and who promises to work all things together for the good of those who love him. Your current emptiness is simply making room for the new things God is preparing to pour into your life. Let the old house go. Let the winter do its deep work in your roots. Let the fire open the seeds of your true purpose. God is still writing your story. The next chapter is about to begin, and it is going to be more beautiful than you could ever imagine.